it's Laura from Doggy U, and today we're going to do part 2 of flying with your dog. So today we're going to talk about what to look for when booking your flight, what to do the day before in preparation, and what to do the day of so you feel confident when you get to the airport and go on your first flight with your pup. In my last video, we talked about assessing your dog's suitability for flight, as well as preparing your dog before you even book the flight for flying in an airplane. If you haven't checked that out, you can check out a link below that I'll link down in the description. So today we're going to talk about booking the flight. When I book a flight, I want to make life as easy as possible for me. That means I'm going to look for a flight that's in the morning and hopefully doesn't have a layover. If it does have a layover, I'm going to look for a very small window of time. Because you have to remember, if you're doing a big flight, say coast to coast like I do frequently, I want to make sure that my dog doesn't need to use the bathroom. And if I have a longer layover, the chances of them having to use the bathroom is higher. Now you might say, hey, I've seen pet relief areas in the airports, maybe they can use those. In all of the dogs that I've flown and given option to use that pet relief area, I've never had a dog use one. They're dirty, they stink, and most dogs are like, ugh, I don't want to go where everybody else has gone. So that's not typically something your dog is going to do. Maybe you get lucky and your dog will relieve in those, but you don't want to count on it. You want to instead think, okay, my dog has to hold it for X amount of time. I want to make that X amount of time as short as possible. So get the direct flight if you can. And then I like to fly in the morning because we're going to talk a little bit about food control later in this video. So I want to have the least amount of time that my dog is on limited or restricted food. So look for a flight in the morning if you can, without a layover if you can. Now, once you've booked your flight, you're going to want to make sure all of your paperwork is submitted correctly for your service animal or ESA. As of the time of this video, ESAs require paperwork and service dogs don't, but we don't know if that's going to change in the future. So you want to check your airline specifically for their rules and policies regarding your service animal or ESA. Once you have all your paperwork submitted, you're going to want to call the airline if you want seat preference. So when I fly with a dog, I want to choose bulkhead seating. Bulkhead seating is that spot in the front of the airplane behind first class where you don't have another seat in front of you to tuck your stuff under, but you do have an extra couple inches of space, and that's gonna make you and your dog more comfortable. Now, you might run into a situation like I did on this recent flight last week where there was also a 90-pound service dog in the aisle with us. So it was, my small 30-pound whip and then this 90-pound service dog and 3 people. And I ended up asking to just switch with my neighbor across the aisle with the exact same seat. And that worked out fine. But the bulkhead does offer a lot of extra space for you that's gonna make your ride typically more comfortable. So if you can, you're gonna call the special assistance line for your particular flight, and you're going to ask for that bulkhead seating. So now that you've booked your flight and it's the day before, it's time to pack. And when I pack, I want to use a hands-free backpack. All my stuff fits in this backpack that I have, and I'll link in the description below a YouTube video I did on using that backpack with dogs. It's super helpful, so you can definitely check that out. But I want to use a hands-free backpack instead of wheeling a carry-on behind me with the wheels and piling things on top of it, and now you've only got one hand to control your dog. And I don't love that. I want to have both hands free in case something comes up, like one time there was an off-leash dog in the airport. So I want to have both hands just in case I need them. Once you've got your bag ready, you're also going to want to pack for your dog. This means that I want to make sure that I have all the equipment that they typically use. This isn't the time to be without a head collar if you typically use a head collar. So make sure you have all of their equipment, and I also recommend it some type of do not pet vest. This keeps people from trying to touch your dog. It doesn't always work, of course, but it gives you a little bit more peace of mind and respect from other people so that your dog, isn't getting pet by everybody in the airport, especially when it's really busy. The other thing that I like to pack is a pee pad. And I know, you're like, dude, my dog's been potty trained forever. Yeah, I know. But if you have it with you, you probably won't have to use it. So, God forbid your dog throws up or gets sick or something like that. If you have that pee pad, that super absorbent pee pad with you, you're more likely to feel more comfortable because you have a contingency plan if your dog does get sick or have an accident. Obviously they shouldn't be having accidents on plane, but sometimes stuff happens, or even if your dog really needs to pee and they won't go on the pet relief area, you might be able to put down a pee pad in that area and give them that use. But they throw up, anything happens, you've got that pee pad just in case. Have I ever had to use one? No, absolutely not. But because I have one, probably don't have to use one. So it just makes me feel safe and prepared. The last thing to think about the day before is feeding. Now, I typically, if I'm having a morning flight, do a third of the typical dinner my dog would get. But you know your dog best. If your dog is totally fine and on a regular schedule with using the bathroom and can have a full dinner, you can do that. I know that I feel most comfortable if my dog has had a smaller dinner than normal. So I'm typically feeding a third to a half of the dinner and then waking up early and giving them ample opportunity to go to the bathroom. So make sure you're not feeding a ton of stuff the night before, and also don't feed anything that they haven't had before that day before the flight. We want to make sure their tummy is totally under control. So it's the day of, what do you do? Well, first of all, you want to get to the airport early enough that you can get through security calmly. That's really important that you don't put any added stress on your dog. And your bag will probably get searched. I have yet to fly with a dog who I haven't had a bag search if my dog food is in the bag. So you also want to pack that dog food really accessibly at the top of the bag because they're gonna take it out and swipe it with their little swipey thing and make sure that there's nothing weird going on. So make sure you get there early enough for that to be something that you are prepared for and aren't rushing to your plane. Let's also talk about food for you and the dog. I don't feed breakfast the day of a flight. I do bring cookies for takeoff and landing and for anything else that I want to reward in the airport. So they're getting a little bit of stuff in their stomach, but it's not a full meal. So I don't want to feed a big breakfast the day of a flight, unless we're talking about a couple-hour flight here. But usually I'm flying quite a bit because if it's close, I was driving. So you want to limit their food in the morning, but make sure you've got cookies for the airport so that you can reward for good behavior, of course. Another consideration is water. I typically take water up the night before and I don't feed water before the flight. So you want to have no water typically 8 hours or so before flight unless there's a medical reason your dog needs it. I do feed ice chips on the plane, so my dog is getting some water during flight, and then I give them a big bowl of water right after we get off so that they can have as much water as they want. That restriction of water will give you a little bit of peace of mind when you're on the plane. Again, as long as your dog is medically okay with that. So let's also talk about food and water for you. I know this is kind of a weird subject, but I try not to drink or eat too much before I go on the plane because if you're flying alone, putting a dog in the bathroom on an airplane with you is really uncomfortable. It's not fun, they're dirty, and you really shouldn't be asking other people to hold your dog or separating yourself from your dog unless you have someone with you. So if you're alone, I try to restrict my own food and water so that I don't have to use the bathroom in flight, because that's no fun. Another thing I will do the day of the flight with a dog is I'll give them some type of herbal supplement. So that could be in the form of like box rescue remedy and just like a liquid herbal that I'm just gonna rub across their nose so that they just feel a little bit calmer, kind of like lavender for humans, or some type of calming aid that's gonna help them just relax and take a break during the flight and hopefully go to sleep, like Composure. I'll link to both of those below if you haven't used them before. You definitely don't wanna just give them to them the day of. You wanna see how these like herbal supplements are going to affect your dog before you go on a flight. But some dogs, they just take a little bit of the edge off, and I often even use lavender on myself because that helps me settle and relax a little bit more in the flight because my dog is reading my body all the time, and if I'm stressed, they're typically going to be a little stressed by the experience as well. Once I get through security and to my gate, I typically go up to the attendant at the gate and ask them if I can board early with that first wave of boarders so that I can get my dog on and settled. My preference for seat is gonna be a window seat so that my dog isn't constantly getting walked past and possibly stepped on. So I'm going to take the towel that I usually bring. So I try to bring a little blanket or a little tiny towel that my dog is familiar with, and I put that down on the floor so they know that's their settling mat. I put them into the row, they go and lay down on the mat while I put my stuff away. And then I'm ready to sit down and get prepared for my flight. So I mentioned before that I also have treats with me when I go on the plane, and that's for takeoff and landing. I typically bring something that's not stinky so my neighbors aren't like, liver, but instead I bring something like cheese that's high value for most dogs. During takeoff and landing, I'm going to feed rewards because that's the loudest and potentially most scary part for your dog. Their body also shifts around, which can be a little disconcerting. So you might want to hold them or hold on to their harness just on the ground where they are during takeoff and landing so that they don't move around too much. So you're gonna feed and hold them in place so that they don't get concerned and get up and move around. During landing, it's particularly important to hold your dog still, either between your knees or with your feet or with your hands, because that's when a lot of that impact is gonna happen, and they might get thrown or shifted a bit, and we want them to have a good experience. So you can always feed, hold, keep your dog safe and stable during those more challenging parts of the flight. And my last tip is breathe. Take a couple deep breaths. You don't want all of that stress that you're feeling to affect your dog's emotional state. So take a couple deep breaths. If you've watched part 1 and 2 of this video and you've done all of the things in the videos, you and your pup are ready to go. So sit back, put on some calming music, and fly to your destination. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for all the latest videos. And if you have comments or questions, go ahead and leave those below. Tell me where you fly with your dog. We'd love to hear about it. So you guys have a great flight and happy training.